The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. Hope you've been having a fine day. I don't plan on covering this, for, till the next Jubilee. I do think that this week I'm probably going to end up investing a lot more time talking about the Israeli Palestinian conflict. It's obviously something that's very topical and whatever. It's really one of my least favorite topics to cover, as I explained yesterday. But I am hoping to bring on tomorrow my father. I haven't really confirmed with him since yesterday. I haven't spoken to him today, but he mentioned that tomorrow should be good, and I'll follow up with him on that tomorrow. And I'm also planning on bringing in other people who disagree with my perspectives about this issue. And on that topic, I started thinking about how Americans became divided the way they are. There's a lot of it. It's not as neatly divided left right as most issues. In fact, it's less divided than most issues on almost any political issue that we see today. If you name the topic and you know someone is leaning left or leaning right, you can virtually guess and be correct at least 75 to 80% of the time as to what side they're going to take in an issue. Pro-life, pro-choice, abortion, immigration, healthcare, economy, First Amendment rights. It's like if you know someone is left, you know where they're going to stand. You know someone is right, you know they're going to stand. When it comes to this Israel Arab or Israel Palestine issue, it definitely seems to break down that the right tends to lean toward Israel more than the left, and the left tends to lean more towards the Palestinian side. And the lines are not nearly as defined as almost any other issue. It's definitely a lot blurrier than most. But we really should start thinking why is it that that should be something that breaks down along left or right lines? It's almost weird to understand that conceptually. And someone on my local shared with me a video which was addressing this, and I was inspired. I said, you know what? I think this is an interesting thing for us to understand why the left ended up becoming so enamored with the Free Palestine movement, like what led to the genesis of that. So I thought I would explore that and spend some time doing that with you guys. So that's my agenda. That's primary agenda. I am thinking when you ask Viva, the Viva and I have disputed on Twitter. I haven't spoken with him other than what you've seen on Twitter. I haven't even DM'd him, where he is of the opinion that Israel should trade hostages to recover the hostages taken by the Palestinians. And he basically blames this invasion on the Israeli government and or Netanyahu's screw up in their defense, and that it's wrong to leave these hostages there when the government screwed up and left them as being hostages. I don't really understand that point, because the reason to be against exchanging hostages has nothing to do with how they became hostages or why they're hostages. It's a matter of creating policies that are designed to keep your country secure. We're all praying for these hostages while fearful of and skeptical of a happy outcome for them. But my position is the fact whether they became hostages because of Netanyahu's neglect or despite unprecedented, amazing defense that somehow nevertheless was breached. doesn't change the fact as far as what impact are we having on those who took them, on the terrorists who took them hostage. What are you making them think and feel? What are you making other potential terrorists think and feel with how you respond to this situation? And it seems to me unlikely that any terrorist is going to say, well, this time Netanyahu caved, but it's not going to work next time. I don't think that makes any sense. So yeah, I mean, should there be accountability if in fact there were screw ups? Definitely. I mean, that makes sense. But to say that some sort of government error should lead to a change in the policy in as far as how you deal with terrorists, to me doesn't really make sense. It's not a matter of like, well, it's justice that I did wrong, so I have to fix this wrong. Because it's not about the individual who did the wrong in the sense of failing to stop the terrorists. It's the terrorists themselves who we want to discourage from thinking that that's a successful tactic, so that we protect other civilians tomorrow. I mean, that's really why you're doing it. Anyway, I don't think it's merely a Christian conservative thing. I don't think it's really, a lot of people might assume that the left-right thing is because it's Christian conservative, which is implying that the only reason you would be pro-Israel is because of Christian conservatism. Either you're Jewish or Christian conservatism, which is just, it's not true. I mean, it's a mistake that people make. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the etymology of this conflict, which is why they might think that. Viva is ultimately embarrassed about being a Yid. He lectured me about using the word guy regarding hostages. Ortho rabbis said to bomb Auschwitz. Yeah. That's a great, I mean, as far I don't know about the incident with you using the word guy. I mean, guy is not the disparaging term that people think it means. It just means non-Jew. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not like a slur. But yeah, as far as bombing Auschwitz, yeah, I think that's a great point. Perfect analogy. Bombing Auschwitz. Just be like, no, we're not. We're going to make you, we're going to make you struggle to commit genocide, even if it means killing the Jews you already have there. How did Mossad or 8200 even not know? This is Bibi's fault. He's a fraud and only interested in protecting his own image. Shame on him. Take care. So Canada Strike, I'm going to tell you this. I cannot explain this. Supposedly, and again, all this happened on Saturday. So I was not, I was on holiday until Sunday evening. I have heard that there was a 12-hour delay in removing the incursion, which is inexplicable. It's inexplicable. But I mean, yeah, there definitely should be accountability. I don't know how that makes him a fraud per se. There's a flaw in, there's no logic to say that, oh yeah, he wanted, it's just, I don't know how this protects his image when he looks, you're sitting here and you're not alone, Kanda, in chastising what the hell happened under his leadership. So I don't know how that's helping his image. But Jim, my boy, Jim, how are you? Hold on a second. I just want to take care of you properly here. So, saying, I gotta hit you that chauffeur. Saying, I couldn't believe Viva brought on that virulent anti-Semite Scott Horton. He spews Hamas propaganda and justifies their actions. And then Tim Pool brought on Max Bloomfeld, the self-hating Jew, blames Israel for every problem. A lot of self-hating Jews. Look, I think people look at it. See, this is the thing. People look at this issue as, your standard issue. Let's get on the pro-life versus the pro-choice person. So I think that's how they sort of look at this. And especially if it's someone who seems self-hating. So it's like, oh, wow, I even got a Jew here to say all these terrible things about Israel, or and it works the same way in reverse. It's like, oh, here's a Muslim saying that the Palestinians are terrible. So that's a very old tactic. But I haven't seen either of those shows. I can't tell you what their motivation was. And I want to be clear in case anyone misunderstood me at all. I love and respect Viva today as much as I did 2 weeks ago, a year ago. He's awesome. Just because I disagree with him on certain topics, that's or best ways to handle things. I still respect the hell out of that man, and I expect I always will. So, okay. So anyway, I wanted to share with you this, which I haven't seen yet. I'll be watching it with you, which I think is the best way to do this. And we're not watching the entire thing. It's a 2-hour long thing, and I'm starting in the middle, and we're gonna be bouncing around as they cover different topics here. But I thought some of the topics here are ones that were uniquely interesting and fit. So without further ado, let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. We're good there. All right, let's get started.
Hamilton, if you scroll up, we've got a lot of links that I've pulled from Twitter, and I mean so many to really get across what's going on. We're going to just briefly go through some of these faster than others, because I'm sure that you've seen a lot of these. This first one is one of the DSA routes.
So over here, their establishment, the left, is very strongly pro-Hamas, and Hamas has been labeled by the United States as being a terror organization because this is what they do. If you go back to Hamas, like after they struck at Israel many years ago, I think it was like 15 years or so ago, and Israel was striking back and trying to knock out just their missile, because they were firing off rockets just as Scud missiles everywhere. And this was like a regular daily thing. And they were storing them in hospitals and in schools because that's what Hamas does. That's what a terror organization does. And just consider this for a moment. Just consider how twisted it is. How cheaply you value your people's blood. That you would store missiles or weapons in a school, a kid's school, or a hospital, knowing that that's obviously going to be a high priority target, because at the end of the day, it's ultimately about PR. That's what the Palestinians, this has been for decades long. It's been a PR war. And the idea that, if Israelis end up killing Arabs, especially Arab children, the Arab or wounded, the more pitiful the victim is, the better the image is if it's flashing across CBS, ABC, CNN, MSNBC. The more powerful it is, because then there are more voices screaming, condemning Israel. So they purposefully slaughter their own. I remember when Israel was sending notifications saying, we're going to bomb this building in 5 minutes. You better get out now. And Palestinian leadership were telling their own people, if you get those notices, don't flee. Stand on the roof of your building and bare your chest to those missiles. Insanity. It's insanity. While the leadership themselves are hiding like cowards and fleeing to other countries, telling their people to stand on a roof and bare their chest to Israeli missiles that are trying to knock out weapons facilities. And you tell me, which people had more concern for the Palestinians themselves? Was it the Israelis who were sending notifications saying, we're about to build this building, we're about to bomb this building, which is a crazy thing to do if you're in a war, to say, hey, that thing over there, that's what we're about to target. No one does that. No one's ever done that before. No one's ever done it since. It's a tactically stupid thing unless you're desperately trying to be humane, like Israel was in that circumstance. And the exact opposite is people saying, no, you should basically let your blood flow. Let your children's blood flow. Proudly. You'll go to heaven. You tell me, who is considering that blood more sacred in that context? The Israelis, who are firing off notices that we're about to bomb you in 5 minutes? Or the Palestinians who say, when you get those notices, climb up to the roof so everyone can see your chest as it's exposed to the missiles. It's insanity. And that's why they've been labeled. That's part of the reason they've been labeled a terrorist organization. Scott Horton's not an anti-Semite. His book, Enough Already, is the definitive history of the war on terror. Regarding intel failure, tech is useless if your enemy stops using tech. The presupposition is that Hamas are stupid. They are not. Evil, but not stupid. Oh, I agree with you. I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they're stupid at all. What do you get? Where are you getting info? Hospitals? It's been reported for 15 years. I'm not saying currently. I'm saying that's what they had done historically. They used UNRWA proceeds, and I actually can share with you a video I was watching like 15, 20 minutes ago of Ben Shapiro on Megyn Kelly on that. I think Bibi was too busy protecting himself over his corruption allegations amid the judicial reforms. Plus, standing with Ukraine, he got reckless. But my question, Candace, is, are you alleging that he intentionally allowed this to happen? See, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just need you to flesh out the steps for me. Meaning, because he's worried about his image. And look, he's not a saint. And I don't assume anyone is beyond looking out for themselves. It's sort of a default starting point for most people, I think, is that they're looking out for themselves. So, especially politicians. But my question is, you sort of need to walk me through the logic. And that is, okay, so he's, for whatever reasons, his image is taking a hit. You're saying because of corruption allegations. Okay, definitely possible. Or issues with standing with Ukraine. So because of that, he was too distracted and became incompetent. Because of that, he enabled this purposefully and said, oh, if they do this, somehow this will help this happens, then my image will be enhanced. See, that's where I'm missing that middle step is where I'm missing things. Need some evidence for these claims. Videos. I can't walk through it every time. But I'll tell you this much. I'll provide evidence of it over the coming days. Okay? It's a fair question. It's a fair point. These are not like I wasn't breaking any news on that. That was not new information. I kind of assumed that most people had heard about that. Ben says, how much of a factor was the holiday? Oh, I definitely think, I'll tell you this much. I mean, historically, this is not the first time that they were attacked on a holiday. The Yom Kippur War 50 years ago, same concept. So I don't know if it's strategically beneficial or if it's symbolically inspirational. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, like, if they attacked on Yom Kippur, that's not a coincidence. They attack on Shmini Atzeret, that's not I don't think that's accidental at all. But I cannot tell you whether their motivation is strategically that it's easier to do that when Jews are on holiday. That's their thought process. Definitely a possibility if that's what was going through their minds. Or it could be that they thought there's a certain symbolism in attacking the Jews on their holiday. But I think it likely was a factor in helping them determine the time. But I can't tell you in what the motive, and it could be a combination of those two. So Egypt stated today that they forewarned of attacks. Okay. That's interesting. And that definitely should be investigated. I don't think that he's beyond the investigation. Raman Sage says, this is good versus evil. The more relativism I've seen from the left over the past few days in my own country is disgusting and foreshadows future issues. Turn Gaza into a smoking pile of rubble. You're not alone in feeling that way. You're not alone in feeling that way. All right, so let's get back to this thing.
Rallies that took place in New York City.
DSA is Democratic Socialists of America.
Yep, and I mean, Hamilton, if you want to play the audio for a second, if you can, you don't need to play the whole thing, of course.
This is the Democratic Socialists of America in New York City today. This is not the Free Palestinian movement. That's why this is significant, and they're sharing this. It's not like, you might have certain people. It could be a coalition of different people from left and right. But this is a group that has nothing to do with international politics. They're fighting for economic reform in America. And they had this whole pro-Palestine rally today in New York.
We'll play the rest of it on mute. You don't need to start from the beginning, by the way. because it's almost 3 minutes long. And again, we're not going to play the entire thing. But I mean, here's one of them. And there's a direct quote from the audio. And if we don't get to it in the podcast, you can go on Twitter and listen to it for yourself. But, somebody was talking about how these resistance fighters came in and electrified hanging gliders and took at least several dozen hipsters out. And then everybody's cheering and clapping and excited about the fact that Hamas terrorists, and that is what they are, and I don't care if people disagree, they're more than welcome to, but Hamas terrorists murdering, butchering innocent people that have nothing to do with the 100+ year long debate between Israel and Palestine.
And by the way, reportedly beheading 40 infants. I mean, beheading infants. Hey, just think about the fortitude, the stomach fortitude you have to have to walk over to an infant and slice and lop his head off or her head off. I mean, what the hell is wrong with you? There's no, I mean, to be that callous, that cold, that level of butchery, and that it's basically totally acceptable, totally fine. Hey, just to enable you to capture that, okay? Imagine if they said before they did it, we're doing this because you're Christian, and then lopped their head off. The outrage you would feel. And properly so. I mean, it's so gross. It is so disturbing. I mean, it's monstrous.
Right? These are people that are at a concert and they're getting slaughtered by the hundreds. It was almost 300 of them were murdered. And that's not counting how many women were raped, by the way. These are the same people that...
The other thing I'll point out to you is most of the video we have of the carnage that they wreaked came from them, which they're proudly filming their work because they look at it as an accomplishment, something to be celebrated.
Talk about that. These are the same people that lecture us and more or less about rape culture on campus and toxic masculinity. And at the same token, they're celebrating war crimes. But here's the thing. You might look at this and think, oh, this is unique. This is a one-off thing. It's actually not. We have a lot of these clips to go through, so we'll go to the next one. Here's the next one. There's only one solution. Intifada revolution. Intifada references the ongoing war, the constant on and off warfare between the Palestinians and
terrorism. Intifada is basically the name for prolonged exhibitions of terrorism.
And the Israelis. This is now considered like the third Intifada. There was two previously before, and one of which that ended in the 2006 disengagement from Gaza. And again, hundreds of pro-Hamas. I'm not even going to call them pro.
The first one was in 1990. The second one was in 2006, and this is, I guess, the third one.
Palestinian pro-Hamas protesters from a DSA rally in the heart of New York City.
Well, and it's interesting that again, it's democratic socialists of America. We're not talking about Palestinians living in New York that are rallying that may agree with what Hamas is doing or may not approve of the Israeli state. It's Democratic Socialists of America. Like it is an organization which is essentially rooted in leftist ideology, not necessarily a very specific or ethnic dog in the fight in this particular, ethnic or religious dog in the fight with respect to this conflict. And yet,
that says word Egypt told him 10 days prior, Bibi dismissed the warnings that there is also the reason some call this Israel's 9/11. I think they call it Israel's 9/11 because it's the most Jewish casualties in one day of civilians since the Holocaust. So, Israeli army disavowed the beheaded infants claim. I appreciate you telling me that. Okay, I will not repeat that. I appreciate you telling me that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I definitely don't want to give out inaccurate information ever. And if anyone ever, corrects me on something, I'm gonna look into that to double check that. Let me see. I want to see that Israel was beheaded. I'm glad. I'm relieved. Thank God. Oh, but that's not what I'm seeing here. Dead babies at a kibbutz near the Israeli-Gaza border. IDF told Insider that some have been decapitated, so maybe there weren't 40 of them. I don't know. But I think you're mistaken. Spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces told Insider on Tuesday that soldiers found the decapitated corpses of babies at Kfar Aza, a kibbutz near Gaza. Spokesperson. Sometimes I don't like being right. Told the Insider that although he hadn't seen images of it himself, soldiers on the ground who are there told me this. These people, Hamas, are animals and are added. They butchered women and children in worse ways than ISIS. Reports started to emerge on Tuesday. Israeli soldiers had made their grisly discoveries at the self-sustaining rural community near Gaza. A later statement from Dinar said, "We cannot confirm any numbers. What happened in Kibbutz Kfar Az is a massacre in which women, children, toddlers, and elderly were brutally butchered in ISIS way of action." So they didn't disavow the beheaded infants. They disavowed that they know that there's 40 of them. Does it matter if it's 40 or if it's 10? Or even 5? I won't use the 40 number anymore. So I appreciate you correcting me on that. And I believe that you were reading what you read, and there's obviously so many conflicting reports during a war. But no, I wasn't reporting propaganda talking points. You are, respectfully, by saying that Israel disavowed beheaded infants. It disavowed the number, but not the fact that it definitely happened. Do you really want to take the position that, if it was only a handful of infants who were decapitated, that's okay? I don't think you do. This is my thought. And maybe you should try listening to all sides too. Hawkinson. Hakatanaka says, "I think it's important to set politics aside and thank Joe Biden for his unfettered and unwavering support of Israel today. It's good to know that he can still provide leadership during times." Yes. That's our leader. Haka, Tanaka. I have a question for you, my friends. I have a question for you. If there's any chance at all that maybe there's been an emboldening of forces of evil after 13 Americans were killed in Afghanistan, maybe like a teensy bit. I don't know. Edward Collins says, because of Bait Clan and Charlie Hebdo, we can believe that Islamists would behead babies. Doesn't matter if it happened or not. We know it could. It's true. The same baby murder excuse that they used to get the American people to sympathize going after Gaddafi via Nayera testimony. I'm not supporting any side. America first or bust. I agree with you. Listen, this is a totally rational perspective that you're expressing here. To basically say what is in America's best interest. That, for any American, is the healthiest. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, that's a thoroughly healthy perspective. Thoroughly healthy. I put the link in chat. 1,000 people died, babies too. You're saying died as if it was COVID. It's not died. Died makes it sound as if there was some terrible tragedy and then there was an earthquake and 1,000 people died. Like, even the way you're framing it, I don't understand how you're framing this. 1,000 people died. No, 1,000 people were murdered. 1,000 civilians were murdered. If there's nothing wrong with it, don't try to clean up the language so it's like they just died. Oh, wow, terrible tragedy. Like the Ebola spread through a camp and 1,000 people died. It's murdered. It's butchered. It's gunned down, beheaded, kidnapped, tortured, some set on fire. 1,000 people died. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's true. First casualty of war is truth. That's definitely true. Why does anyone talk about the Egypt blockade? I don't know anything about the Egypt blockade. That's an interesting question. The Lady Kara says, whether Jew or Gentile, we can all agree that no taking a life in these manners is justified under any banner but evil. May God bless you, Joe, for your efforts to make sense of raging thoughts. Thank you. I really do try to make sense. I really do try to make sense. Let me get back to this video.
They automatically
that was dramatic.
Associate with an organization like Hamas. And just to give you an idea, I want to read off just a couple of things. In the Hamas charter, they have what's called the call to jihad. And it says and
it's such a strange marriage when you consider how anti-civil rights, anti-gay rights, anti-women rights, and racist they should be looking at Palestinians. That's what's so ponderous about this pro-Palestinian, this free Palestine movement from leftists. You would think that this is the craziest marriage in the world. Most of these people, if they were actually in an Arab country, would be the first ones murdered. And that's what's so astonishing, is that it's almost as if and what I actually think is part of this is that they just really don't appreciate the blessings that they have here in America, that they're free to express themselves, and they assume that that's the way it's like. It's a Western mindset that everyone lives like I live, and that they think they're being oppressed if they're not able to get chocolate cake for their birthday. It has to be vanilla, as opposed to like, no, oppressed means butchered. like literally, they can't even conceive of their own mortality and recognize how fragile life is. Pam says, hi. Admiral Kirby says climate change is more important than nuclear war. When is one of his geniuses going to come up with a carbon footprint for the Ukraine war? I don't know. We need to know. Pam. I'm going to train. But Joe, if I admit that this evil is real, then I have to stand against him, possibly fight, which will take time out of my American leisure.
Day the enemies usurp part of Muslim land, jihad becomes the individual duty of every Muslim. In the face of the Jews' usurpation, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad.
Murder by anyone is barbaric. Jews, U.S., Hamas, all. Okay. Well, at least you're using the term murder now, Antian. So that's a start. That's a start. I plan on having. I plan on trying to get Liberty Lockdown on here. I'll ask you this. I'll ask you, Auntie Anne. Do you agree with the notion of bombing Auschwitz? Let's assume that we could calculate that there's roughly 5,000 people in Auschwitz, and that if we bomb Auschwitz, that will save 50,000 lives. Would you say that we should bomb it or not? Do you think that's moral for us to actually bomb them, kill them? Do you think that that's moral, or do you think that's immoral? I don't think it's this simple. I don't think it's nearly this simple. There's a lot more to it, and that's where we're going to get to. You're sitting here saying like, oh, and I think that this moral relativity is of like, oh, just killing is killing or murder is murder. It's always barbaric, and equalizing them is whitewashing. That's the reason I have a problem with your position here. I think you're whitewashing barbarism, and you're basically saying that, well, in both situations the person's dead. It's like, if Dow Brooks died in that car when he's running people over, well, he died too. I think that moral equivalence is a very dangerous perspective, and I don't think it's enlightened. I think it's the opposite of that. Why is this thing struggling? I can't get that up. That's so weird. What is happening? Why is this doing that? You guys see that? What the heck is happening here? I'm not doing it. My hands are up here. Okay, that was weird. Thank you. Good discussion. I appreciate it. All right, let's get back to this.
Jihad be raised. And then it says anti-Semitic incitement. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks.
Let's get to this. Big poop. Sorry, MB says, if you check the Gregorian calendar, I was talking about those, it was the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. Oh, that would make sense. That could be that. Evil cannot be negotiated with; it must be destroyed. Is another comment from Anby. Yeah, and that's something that I think that Westerners cannot really appreciate. The concept, that's something that some people actually just are evil. It doesn't mean anyone of that race is evil. It doesn't mean that anyone who lives in that region or agrees with them politically is evil. But that to just disregard the existence of evil is inviting evil, or to compare the destruction of someone who is evil to the destruction of someone who was not even engaged in the fight is not. It's a ridiculous comparison.
Trees and the rocks and trees will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." That's Article 7 of the Charter. And then you also see the Hamas regards itself as spearhead in the vanguard of the circle of struggle against world Zionism. Islamic groups all over the world, Arab world, should also do the same, since they are best equipped for their future role in the fight against the warmonger. Jews. This is Article 32 of the Charter of Hamas. So again, let's be real clear about the organization that's launching this attack, what their philosophy is, what they mean. It's not as if they're couching all of this in language that can't be clearly understood. I mean, this is what they stand for, and yet, right? And so I just find that's interesting. Let's look at the next one.
Hamilton, is it possible for you to play the audio of any of these for our audio listeners? That's the reason I'm asking, because I across the entire Western world, basically.
I don't know why I'm having such trouble with this.
So Hamilton, if you pause this one, there's one more that I want to show, and this one is probably the most despicable.
And that was
I wonder if I'm having a computer issue here. It's very possible. I'm going to go back because that was very... Let me go back a minute. I apologize for that. I'm having all sorts of issues here.
That the banner of jihad.
Meanwhile, the next 9/11 is surely walking right across the border. It's beyond criminal to not secure the border. Almost certainly. I mean, at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, like, we don't have no idea who's coming here. Like, zero idea. And then when it happens, it'll be like, oh, for some reason, we'll be able to blame the Republicans. It's all their fault. Bombing imprisoned people is a war crime. Imprisoned people have a duty to escape by any means necessary. Concentration camps in Auschwitz and Gaza. Go to hell. You're a moron. You are a living idiot. You are a bumbling clod. I don't care if you send me super chat after super chat. You are disgusting. What the hell is wrong with you? Seriously, I want to know, Auntie Anne, what the devil is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? Do you actually like walk around like saying, oh my God, where did I put my brain today? That you could actually compare Gaza to Auschwitz shows that you have literally zero clue. The plot is way over there, and you're over here saying like, oh my gosh, the plot is amazing. What is wrong with you? Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you? That you have the audacity to say that an area which has been offered statehood, its own personal statehood, 9 times and rejected it, is Auschwitz. Are you out of your mind? How much stupidity, how much crap, how much drivel have you swallowed up that you have the audacity to come here into my chat and send me some stupid, moronic, idiotic super chat comparing Gaza to Auschwitz? Are you out of your mind? What the hell is wrong with you? In Auschwitz, where they march people, where they're sitting there under locked guard 24/7, being fed little scraps of bread every single day, stripped naked and left out in the freezing cold and left to work or die. And everyone who went there was forced to either work themselves to death or basically wait until death came for them. The stench of death was everywhere there, every single day. Millions of people dying. And you're sitting here comparing to a concentration camp, that Gaza is a concentration camp, when any time that they come up and rear their ugly, brutal hand and Israel retaliates, before retaliating, they say, hey, we're going to be taking out this place where you're storing missiles. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is like Auschwitz. Are you out of your mind? Seriously. Do you look at like little fireflies and say, oh, lightning, it's everywhere. It's lightning. How stupid can you be? This is the problem with moral equivalence. You are the problem, Auntie Ann. You are the problem because you're so out of your stinking mind that you could actually have the audacity to come here and say to me a comparison of Auschwitz and Gaza simply because you think that you're pushing my buttons. That like, oh, if you feel bad about Auschwitz, you should feel bad about Gaza. No, I think that you're a moron. I think that you're a complete and totally stupid human being. I think either that or you're criminally insane. Or the third option is you're just legitimately evil. God. Gaza and Auschwitz. You're going to tell me about war crimes when you don't have a freaking clue what you're talking about? You're the first stinking clue about. You are an idiot. Seriously, you're a moron. Gaza and Auschwitz. Unbelievable. That's not raising up Gaza, what you just did. What you did was spitting on what Auschwitz actually was. That's why what you said was so offensive. And that you're trying to actually play into the fact that, oh, since he's Jewish, he's going to feel bad about Auschwitz. That was disgusting. Just like Auschwitz. Sit here about these people like flying in on electric power gliders, like killing civilians because they're just like Auschwitz. Stupid. Firing off missiles, just like all those Auschwitz people. All of them. That's what they were all doing. Idiot. Their own schools, their own centers, their own police forces, their own governance, just like Auschwitz. Schmuck. It's like you're so wrapped, your head is so buried in your own stupidity. So buried in your own stupidity. You sit here coming up with these ridiculous comparisons because you think, oh my gosh, if I make a big stink about it, if I basically hype up exactly how terrible the situation is there, then someone's going to actually listen to me. No, we think you're an idiot. God. Sadly, there were more important targets. The best way to stop the camps was to end the war. Diverting assets may have delayed that. And look, as far as on the moral question, I agree with you that a lot of people blame FDR and specifically Kennedy, his ambassador, for refusing to bomb the tracks to Auschwitz. To put the casualties in perspective, 9 million in Israel, 327 million in U.S., 1,000 murdered and 3,000 injured in Israel is like 36,000 killed and 110,000 injured in U.S. Yeah, that's a fair assessment right there. Joe, go to Mario, press lady in Israel, talks with IDF and mentions baby's third message down. I can't do that right now. I really can't do that now. Antiana is fighting hard for liberal objectivity. This kind of unserious worldview that leads to more deaths. It's true. And that's why it gets me mad, because that actually leads to more people dying. Stupid people like you make more people die, because you actually serve to encourage this type of terrorism. You and the Ilhan Omars of the world and the Khaleesi's, you encourage it, because you basically say, hey, if you go kill more innocent people, we will sit here crying about how oppressed you are. That's why it's disgusting. Just go kill some innocent Jews who are at some stupid party and butcher them and behead infants, and that'll give us an excuse to talk about how oppressed and miserable your life. How it's just like Auschwitz. Go to hell. Tim Pool had Matt Blumenthal on his podcast tonight promoting Palestine. That's an idiot also. Most angry Jews are calling for the destruction of Hamas. Most angry Arabs are calling for the end of all Jews. Am Yisrael Chai. Things are definitely heating up. Kick Annie, Ann, and Cheese, please. They are trolls. I'd really like an explanation from these people who claim that I'm not big on the whole kicking people. I don't like kicking people. If they're not spamming, not being racist, not violent temp service, they can be stupid. I'll call them out on their stupidity. I'd really like an explanation from these people who claim that Gaza is a prison and they're being starved out as to how they got the missiles and weapons but couldn't escape or get food brought in. Yeah. And never forget Munich. Munich is where 11 Israeli athletes were killed, were assassinated for being Jewish at an Olympic Games. Edward Collins says, Haka Tanaka, all life is morally equivalent. One murder, one hostage is one too many. It's an error to talk about numbers in this way. See Robert Heinlein. I think it's to show the scale of the tragedy. You wouldn't call one person being butchered. One person being butchered would be terrible, but you wouldn't call it 9/11. So I think that's why Haka Tanaka was making that point, Edward. Pam says, what is the difference now between Hamas and Hezbollah? Hamas is worse. They're worse. With regard to FDR and Auschwitz, it was near strategic HVT. All they would had to do was add the target to bombing. All it took, it's in the book Perfidy. Iran, who are 12ers, want to make Israel to overreact because they want to hasten the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, which means the start of the end of times. Could be. Oh, damn, Skippy, you can. I need that war whoop now. Whew. All right, let's get back to why the left is so stupid.
Jihad be raised. And then it says anti-Semitic incitement. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." That's Article 7 of the Charter. And then you also see the Hamas regards itself as spearhead in the vanguard of the circle of struggle against world Zionism. Islamic groups all over the world, Arab world, should also do the same, since they are best equipped for their future role in the fight against the warmongering Jews. This is Article 32 of the Charter of Hamas.
The warmongering
so,
Jews.
Again, let's be real clear. about the organization that's launching this attack, what their philosophy is, what they mean. It's not as if they're couching all of this in language that can't be clearly understood. I mean, this is what they stand for.
This is about
destroying
Jews.
Right. And so I just find that's interesting. Let's look at the next one.
Hamilton, is it possible for you to play the audio of any of these for our audio listeners? That's the reason I'm asking, because I'm trying to get across to the people that don't watch the show but listen to the show exactly what's going on. Sure, it doesn't need to be this one, but it's certainly the last one. Here's another one. This is actually a back and forth argument between pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian protesters. By the way, this is not just taking place in the United States. This is taking place in Canada. This is taking place in the UK. This is taking place in Australia. It's taking place in Germany and France, across the entire Western world, basically. So, Hamilton, if you pause this one, there's one more that I want to show, and this one's probably the most despicable of them.
And that was in a suburb of Seattle, by the way.
No. You skipped. Next one. No.
Other way.
Other way, Hamilton.
One more to the left. One more to the left.
You keep skipping.
One more to the left.
There
you go.
There you go.
We got
You're going to need to want to go back to the beginning and then play the audio on this. This is in front of the Sydney Opera House.
Is that about Zionism? Is that, they're just anti-Zionist when they're saying gas the Jews? Gas the Jews? Is that about Zionism? Really? It's just about being oppressed. Is that about being in Auschwitz? That's why. Because the poor Palestinians are in their own personal Auschwitz.
So there's a lot of screaming, gas the Jews, F the Jews. That's
probably made up too. This is
a pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas rally going on in Sydney outside of the Opera House.
Yep.
Go ahead and click on the next link.
And that just does it right there.
Yeah, this is actually somebody at the now I think this has actually been verified. But she's holding up actually a Nazi flag on her phone.
They misidentified it. That was actually a he. That was the way that it was shown. It made it look like that it was one of the women that was holding it up. But for our audio listeners, this is the DSA rally in New York City again.
I don't know if he's holding that up to basically. A lot of people love comparing Zionists to Nazism. So I don't know if that's why he's holding up, or if he's basically praising the Nazis. Who the hell knows? It's like the left can't keep things straight. Whether Nazis are terrible, or they should become Nazis, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Somebody holding up literally a Nazi swastika. And
it's like either Nazis were really good in that they were killing Jews, or the Jews are Nazis. This is not at all about Jews. No. It's about statehood. It's totally about statehood. It's not bloodlust at all. No. Why would you think that? Why would you think that? You're just crying wolf there.
The reason that we bring this up is because there's been some elements of the left, the liberals, not the left, not leftists. There's been some elements of liberals, center left type people, the type of people that would disagree with Nick and I on the top marginal tax rate.
Yeah.
Who have seen the rhetoric, the cheering, all of this going on, and have started to come to some incredible conclusions about just what people actually believe. And part of this is because, as one person pointed out, this one guy on Twitter, he has the Twitter handle No Opinion. He pointed out that the left, like leftists, have chosen some really interesting allies in this lately. Yeah. And speaking of that, a lot of them are in American academia. We have talked about this in the podcast before.
That's a large part of where this comes from. Is American academia. My father talked about this when he was on the show. One of the first times that he appeared on my show, he talked about how it goes back 50 years to the oil crisis in the 70s. When there was the oil crisis in the 70s, the Persian Gulf grew in wealth exponentially. And maybe they'll talk about it, but basically, they started investing in the American education system, creating chairs. and departments and giving millions of dollars to elitist schools across the country and grants to places Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Cal, any massive schools, more and more elitist schools, for them to basically create with the caveat that they had to create programs to teach students about and present a pro-Muslim perspective. So that became, for our education system, they were financially incentivized to start teaching American kids about how wonderful the Muslim world is. And that's not to say that the Muslim world is inherently bad or evil. It's not. But basically, to whitewash any of the ugliness as if it's totally acceptable, tolerable, justified.
The ideological capture of most of our institutions in this country. And here's just a few samples of examples of academics, professors at taxpayer-funded and also private institutions, universities across the country that aren't just okay with what happened, but are actually openly celebrating the massacre of 1,000 women, men, children, foreigners, not occupiers, not Zionists, innocent people. The systematic butchering of those people in the span of 72 hours, celebrating that under the guise of decolonization.
Decolonization. Yeah. Josh Bacol says, do you worry about your community attacks with all the possible radicals that may have come across the border? I can't live my life in fear. I'll tell you something. When I spent a year in Israel from 1989 to 1990, when I was 19 years old, I was studying there, and I spent a Shabbos in Hebron, what we call Hebron, which is, at the time, had like 75,000 Arabs and 30 Jews living there. And the mayor of Hebron at the time was a gentleman by the name of Yechiel. I think Yechiel was his name. Leiter, definitely last name. I remember his name was Yechiel or Avi. I don't know why I'm talking about that. Yechiel, yeah, it was Yechiel. It was this dude was just, he was like this crazy alpha. Like, he was just like a powerhouse, this guy. He was living there with his wife and kids. They had these, like, I don't know, 20 houses in a row. And they're right on the outskirts of Hebron. And he was describing to me how when his wife goes to the shuk, the market, to buy food, she has to carry neshek with her, which means gun, in order to make sure she doesn't get killed. And I just started picturing that. Like, imagine having to go to like Walmart and to like stay safe, you have to bring a gun with you. I mean, it wasn't Walmart at the time. There was no Walmart in 1990. But I mean, I was picturing Pathmark because that's where my mother used to shop back then. But like, I was like, that's crazy. That's crazy. How do you not worry all the time? And what he said to me was, he looked me in the eye. He said, never forget this. Worry is paying interest on a problem that you never need to pay. And I thought that was a really powerful statement. Obviously, I remember it 33 years later. Worry is interest on a problem that no one ever needs to pay. And yeah, could I worry? Do I think that that's legitimate concern that should be safeguarded from? Yeah, sure. But to actually spend all my time thinking about it, no. At the end of the day, my wife I will tell you this. My wife had a conversation with someone just today who told me she was scared to leave her house. precisely because of what you're talking about here, Josh. And so there are people who are worried. My wife actually said to her, she said, you can't live your life in worry. We're all in God's hands, ultimately. You could also get hit by a bus. It could happen. Anything could happen. You can't live your life in fear. If you try living your life in fear, you're existing. You're not living. So it takes you can't be reckless, but just living is not being reckless. Bob that got me mad said on the subject of bombing prisons, death I suspect is final, whereas life, while horrific, has the possibility of beauty and grace. That's true. Auntie Ann is back. Trying to understand what is relative to you. Is the degree of prisoner torture? 19 years of imprisonment, terrorizing civilians, killing journalists, murdering babies for throwing rocks. It's wrong. You don't know what you don't know the blessed clue what the hell you're talking about. I think you're a blithering idiot. Okay? I think you're a blithering idiot. And you can send me more and more super chats, and I don't think you have the capacity to change my mind about the fact that you are a blithering idiot. Killing journalists. What the hell are you talking about? Murdering babies, throwing rocks. Yeah, okay. Just insane. I think you're insane. I think that you're so open-minded that your brains have fallen out. Okay? I think you're either like seriously insane or you're an idiot. And you've been turned into a useful idiot for people who want you to propagandize, and you're doing your bidding. So there you are. But terrorizing 19 years. Israel's not been in Gaza in the last 17 years. God, I'm so frustrated. Can't. Pam. As an engineer, we design buildings for safe occupancy. There are no design parameters for the devastation I'm seeing on both sides. That's true. That's true. Running a scale, yes, I get what he was saying. Danger is we slip into it was only one person, only 10 people, only 100 people, only. That's true. You're right. And I'll tell you something else. I mean, I think it was Stalin who said, 3 people is a tragedy. 3,000 people is a statistic. And it's horrible. It's horrible. So all the rocks and trees crying out, there's a Jew behind me, would come in handy over the next few days. I'm skeptical this is how it will play out. I don't know what that's a reference to. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Joe, when will the Jewish community and Ginos wake up and realize the party they support is constantly undermining their beliefs? I know many are waking up and not enough. Peace be with you and your family. Well, I'll share this with you, Fire PA, and thank you for the warm thoughts. I'll share this with you. I actually got a text message from a pretty stout leftist, one of my few leftist friends. And no, I've never had Hakataka with him. He's someone who I met only once. And so he's someone I met through social media and then met in person. And we disagree on everything. I had him on the show here once even. And yeah, he reached out to me for the first time in many months today. And I think that he's starting to get frustrated with what he sees from the left. They're saying to gas murder Jews or nuke flying Gaza or kill all of any race, religion, or fascist, whatever flavor, it's evil and hateful. Okay. Yeah. Why are they saying to gas the Jews, Anne? Why the hell are they saying to gas? What did the Jews do? Tell me that. They're not saying kill all Arabs. You're blurring lines here. It's like the lines become very, very convenient for everyone to say, oh, no, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist. But then when it starts becoming gas the Jews, oh, well, that's just what they're saying, And you're saying, when people saying kill Gazans, that's genocide. You're trying to kill all the Arabs. No, it's the objective, the issue that people have, those who are calling for it, and some people are. is not to eliminate world Arabs. It's saying that this is a problem that's never going to go away, and it's only getting worse. And it's coming from Gazans, whatever stripe they are. And I'm not saying that as to say that I think it's justifiable. I've been mulling this issue over my mind a lot. A lot. But no one's saying kill all the Arabs the way they're saying kill the Jews. So you tell me, Annie, why the hell are they saying kill the Jews? How many liberal Jewish lawyers will go ahead and hire the yutzes at Harvard and NYU cheering on the baby killers? Yeah, don't get me started on that. What's the answer post this war? Back to the two-state talk? Integration, status quo wasn't working. It was working, but clearly the defense that they have is insufficient. I don't think anyone has a clean answer. It's been 50 years and no one's been insightful enough to come up with a clean answer. Especially when you're, you know what, how many people have we seen try to have talks? Clinton was sure when he was president that he was going to be able to resolve this. And he basically said they have zero interest in actually finding statehood. That's why I said yesterday, this is not a movement. This is a mob. And that's why I think when people carry water from them, like Auntie Anne, they're basically encouraging a mob to keep being violent and killing, torturing civilians. I feel for those people who are those Arabs who are living in Gaza who really genuinely would want a state. I'm sure there are some, and those are the people I feel. That's why it's such a difficult question. Otherwise, it'd be really easy just say nuke the entire area. That's what makes it. I know that it's not like all Palestinians are terrorists. I know there's a lot of women and children there. I also know that they're training their children to basically kill Jews. I've seen schools. I've seen pictures of them like dressed in like you know with in warfare with the 3-year-olds. And that's not to say that I think it's okay to kill a 3-year-old. Certainly don't. It's really tough. It's really tough. I'm not going to be able to offer you an answer because there is no answer. There's no answer that people are going to be happy with. Because when you basically have one side, it's like, we refuse peace. No matter what. Unless you're annihilated, we refuse peace. So you tell me, what are you supposed to do with that? Auntie Anne knows. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. After watching the PBD roundtable with Muslims and Christians, I have far less sympathy for what U.S. did in Iraq and Afghanistan. They believe apostate should be deleted, never a choice. I didn't get to watch that roundtable. I should need to check that out. The left imagine their heads weighing too much. Naturally, they want them gone. Josh says, can you have DUI on to talk about his experience? I can. He probably would come on. Patricia Johnson. You know what? I'm going to just randomly send him. I'll try. I'll reach out to him. I'm going to have people on this. I'm going to try to get people on this week. And thank you, Patricia Johnson. I appreciate that. Charon or Kiryat Arba, this guy who lives 2 blocks from Morris Machpelah, my neighbors were there. They knew the Baruch Goldstein still. They knew Baruch Goldstein still a touchy issue. It was Charon. That was the thing. Yeah, it's Charon. 1,000 deaths is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Attributed to Uncle Joe. Probably apocryphal, but believable because Stalin. Yeah. I was thinking about making a joke when I said that comment. Thanks for the for looking that up for me, or if you knew off the top of your head, kudos to you. Tip my cap to you. Yeah, I was thinking about like making it like saying like attributing it to like Gandhi or something like that because I thought that'd be funny. But yeah, I will say it: neutralize all Arabs. They won't leave the 14th century. Leave them there. Can't play defense forever. Best defense is offense. Imbeciles can't be fixed, Joe. Forgot them. Yeah, you know what? It was specifically, it's not all the other stupid it was the comparison to Auschwitz that really touched a nerve. That touched a nerve. That touched a real nerve.
So here's one example for you right here. Emil J. Joseph, PhD, and of course he has he.
Oh, that was your first super chat? You sent the message earlier, chat, not realizing what I was doing? Oh, I did that also. I did the same thing. First time I sent a super chat, it was just like money. I'm like, no! No! It was so upsetting. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Him pronouns in his bio right there. Here's what he.
Vespa guy in locals says, and by the way, there's a pretty active locals chat if you're wondering, which is goodlogic.locals.com. Goodlogic.locals.com. Vespa guy saying, I don't really know much about the history behind the conflict other than what I hear from your channel. I haven't caught a live show in a while, but this seemed relevant, so I thought I'd jump on to send you this. It's an excerpt from a book written by Thomas Sowell, 4-minute video, and I thought he raised good points in a short time. Love you and all the diggers. I'll be back listening live in a week or two. Well, we miss you, Vespa guy. It was. I'm gonna try and do this. There's a 4-minute video. I'm gonna try and do this in a little bit.
He says, post-colonial, anti-colonial, and decolonial are not just words you heard in an EDI workshop.
That stands for equality, diversity, and inclusion.
Equity.
Yeah. Well, it can be either, but yeah. Yeah. No, it's and again, so somebody RGC just said, question, how come nobody mentions the innocent Palestinian people who Israel is about to obliterate? I don't know. I don't know how more. Here's the part. RGC, I don't know you. I don't know if you watch the channel. So I'm going to assume you mean this is a genuine question, because I've seen other people ask it where it was entirely intellectually dishonest. So I'm going to totally give you the benefit of the doubt. People do mention it. We mention it. I don't want innocent Palestinians to die. I don't want anyone to die. I also think it's very, very important to distinguish. And we mentioned this in the beginning. Whenever you're talking about armed conflict, and I know because I've been in it, whenever you're talking about armed conflict, you have fog of war. You have, and I don't use this term loosely as if to be dismissive, but they call collateral damage. And what that means is damage that was not intended. When you have somebody that attacks you and then you respond, and then before you respond, you tell everyone, hey, we're going to respond. Don't be around military targets. If you can leave, leave. If you can get to a safe position, get to a safe position. And then you attack the area that you said you were going to attack. You have done everything you can possibly do to attempt to prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage. But if the only standard you're willing to accept is no, if anybody innocent gets killed, then they're war criminals and they're bad and they're evil, then what you've done is you've accepted a paradigm where Hamas gets to go in, butcher and murder and kill people indiscriminately, or sometimes deliberately targeting innocent people because they believe it will have the highest impact, political impact. And then when anybody responds, if it's anything less than pristine and perfect, it is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so what you are doing, you are creating an impossible paradigm.
That's exactly what people like Auntie Anne have done. That's the stupidity. That's part of the stupidity of what she was dropping.
In which you actually elevate terrorist attacks. Because what you're saying is that, well, if they engage in terrorist attacks, well, hey, look, that's just something that they had to do because they're at such a major disadvantage militarily or technologically. But if you respond in any way where someone gets killed, even if you take every single reasonable measure you can imagine, then what you're saying is nope, Israel just has to sit there and get trashed, get burned, get butchered, get murdered. They just have to sit there and take it.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to respond.
Yeah.
Like I don't want this war to be going on. I don't want either side to be losing people. I don't want innocent people.
Nobody but Hamas wants this war to be going on. Nobody but Hamas wants this war to be going on.
Die. I would love a scenario where it is where Hamas just wants to launch strategic military attacks against military targets, and Israel gets to respond against those military targets. But Hamas doesn't like to do that. Hamas likes to go in, kidnap people, and then use them as human shields. So once again, we in case anybody is wondering, we don't want any innocent people to die. We don't want anybody to die. We especially don't want innocent people to die, regardless.
I echo everything that this gentleman is saying. Everything he's saying, I agree with 1,000%.
Of what side they might be on the conflict. Right. But, Hamas has an excellent opportunity right now. They have an excellent opportunity right now to demonstrate that they also don't want the loss of innocent human life. They could actually facilitate and request that countries like Egypt or other Arab countries in the world take on non-combatants and civilians so they can fight. So they can fight in a realm where they don't have to worry about that collateral damage. You think Hamas is going to do that?
Zero chance.
Hamas will do the opposite.
They'll bring in more civilians.
Because Hamas wants to take the camera there and say, "Oh my gosh, look at how horrible this was."
At the same time,
I'm done with this idea of talking about this as if this is all just happening in a vacuum. It isn't.
Yeah.
So
and that's what people like Auntie Anne or Ilhan Omar want you to believe. That's the lunatic position.
Again, I'm going to assume your question was genuine. That's my genuine response to it. I don't want any innocent people to die. Don't want any innocent people to die. However, I also understand that if you go out and you attack somebody and they come back and attack you, you don't get to load up innocent civilians where they're going to attack and then feign like you cared about the innocent civilians. You don't get to do that.
This is happening at the same time that Hamas has publicly threatened to execute hostages on live television and broadcast it on the internet. So for anybody to try to make some sort of moral equivalency between the actions of Israel and the actions of Hamas, I would ask this question. Who would you rather be captured by?
Yeah.
Yep. And I say this as somebody who, by the way, has publicly come out before and said, I don't think we should. This is a very controversial position to take on the right, especially within American politics. I've come out in the past and said that I don't think we should give Israel.
I'm going to pump him. This is Nick Freitas. I never heard of him before, but oh my God, I'm really loving this. In fact, I'm going to actually include his link here.
Foreign aid or military aid. I don't think that the United States should be giving anybody foreign aid or military aid. And I understand that there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that, and that's totally okay. But I hold that position mostly because I actually do genuinely care more about, the situation that like we have on the southern border than I do about foreign borders 1,000, 3,000 miles away from the United States. But I can hold that position on one hand, and on the other hand, also call out evil for evil.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but butchering innocent people and then executing hostages and broadcasting it on the internet and then bragging about it and slapping DEI labels like decolonization in front of it and patting yourselves on the back for being the good guys. No, that's evil. Yeah. And by the way, here's another tweet from another professor who says, Jario Funes Flores says, decolonization is about dreaming and fighting for a present and future free of occupied indigenous territories. It's about a free Palestine. It's about liberation and self-determination. It's about living with dignity. Decolonization is not a metaphor. No, apparently decolonization equals genocide. So you're right, it's not a metaphor. I actually replied to this guy and said the last 24 hours have shown us that decolonization is actually about the mass murder and rape of women and children by people who use whatever slogans and buzzwords they want to provide moral justification for their atrocities.
Nice.
This is an academic. This is a professor in Texas tweeting this. By the way, he's not alone. We've got all the receipts that you could possibly ask for pulled up here. Here's another tweet. Look at this one. 100,000 likes from a Somali living in Minnesota saying, what do y'all think decolonization meant? Vibes, papers, essays, losers.
Yeah, it is interesting. We were pointing this out before. So a Somali in Minnesota is talking about decolonization. Again, the United States is a country where we actually largely welcome immigrants into the country, but I do think it's interesting that he doesn't see any potential irony in his own statement there, especially when you look at what he's willing to justify in the name of, quote, decolonization. What she's willing to justify in the name of decolonization. But the reason why we went through the whole history of the Levant was to be able to demonstrate that if you had some sort of notion in your mind that Jews across the world one day just randomly decided, gosh, this part of the Mediterranean Sea is really nice this time of year, I think we'll take over this place, without having any sort of ancestral background to it, that doesn't make sense.
And I skipped over that part. I jumped. I started from the part relevant to what I was focusing on here, because, and I can talk with you about the historical part, the historical background of Jewish claims and the whole etymology of the evolution of the country Palestine. What is a Palestinian? Because as Patrick Allen points out here, for good measure, hashtag Palestine does not exist. Piss off anyone that thinks otherwise. Yeah. There's real questions as to what the hell a Palestinian is. 75 years ago, there was no such thing as a Palestinian. No one identified as a Palestinian. People living in Palestine before Israel was formed. That's not part of nationalism. Was not nearly the thing it is today in the Middle East. It's an invented idea in order to garner sympathy that we don't have our own state. We're Palestinians without a state. When their great grandparents, the ones who actually are descendants of people who live there, almost certainly did not refer themselves as Palestinians, but as Arabs, proudly, as Muslims, who happen to live in Palestine. We here in America, it's a Western thing to basically be very about the country of our origin or the locale that we're from. I mean, going back historically, it was all about the state you were from, right? I mean, it was New York. You were a New Yorker or a Virginian, a Georgian, until that became being an American. And that was your identity. Muslims traditionally, nor Jews, living in the Middle East, were really about the whole Israeli thing. They weren't. It was about their Jewishness. That's why it was about forming a Jewish state. What does that mean? So it was about abolishing a Jewish state. That's why the link is always there. Show the pro-Israel. God, don't stop. Show the pro-Israel protest. They certainly are saying kill every Arab. Okay. Watch one-sided biased news, and your facts are skewed as yours are. Trust me, your facts are incredibly. Your facts are so stupidly skewed, and that your inability to actually see through it displays such a lack of depth that I worry for you and your offspring. Attributing to Gandhi would be funny. I approve. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Titus, and thank you again. That was back to back. I don't know if that was intentional, but either way, I thank you for your support, brother. Joe, look up show on Ryan's interview with Nick Epic. I'm trying to get to that. Nick Fried is a former Virginia state senator who had some epic speeches on the floor. You know, that particularly in regards to 2A. A couple went viral 3 to 4 years ago. Sacred Clown says, first time the name Palestinian came about was the dig of the Jews, the first time after the Roman Wars, renamed their land in spite for the revolts. Yeah. That is where the name country of Palestine came from. It was Romans who attached it.
Sense. And for everybody that is then coming back and saying, oh, well, what about this? No, you're the one making this argument. I'm just pointing out that it doesn't seem to bear any sort of intellectual consistency or honesty with everything else that you say. But again, and we're going to get to this, maybe intellectual consistency and honesty is.
But my point was not as like when I was talking about like no such thing as a Palestinian. There was no people in Syria. I do not believe that people in Syria primarily think of themselves as Syrians. They think of themselves as Muslims living in Syria. That's just in the region. Perhaps recently that's changed, but that's influence of the West. That's not the way things were for millennia.
Is not the point. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next tweet. A group of Harvard students, for our audio listeners, a group of Harvard students released a statement that begins, "We, the Understein student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence."
Aviva Klampus. What an embarrassment you are. Your grandparents are turning in their grave that they actually had you. Aviva.
The statement continues, but that's all you need.
Oh, sorry. Aviva's probably reporting on it. My apologies. I don't think Aviva's made the statement. My apologies. Sorry, Aviva. Hi. My apologies. That was bad. Bad job, me.
To know. Israelis young and old were slaughtered in their homes. Entire families were butchered in cold blood. In one home, a terrorist shot the parents dead, took a child's cell phone, and live streamed the horrors on the child's Facebook account. Elsewhere, dozens of young people were massacred at a music festival. Grandmothers were snatched from their homes and taken hostage. They took mothers carrying babies. Hamas is currently holding over 100 hostages, most of whom are civilians. Some are babies and children. But again, here's the list of what is it? This is the list of organizations.
There was 31 Harvard
31.
organizations. There's the Hamilton. The next tweet goes into more detail about
Harvard
this. If you
Jews
click on the next link that we have at the top.
Harvard, they're so enlightened. Oh, they're so enlightened, these Harvard students.
And I know that it's hard for Hamilton to do this because the light in his eyes. So
Yeah.
here's another one. 31 Harvard organizations have declared that the murders, rapes, kidnappings, and other atrocities committed by Hamas against innocent people are in no way the fault of Hamas, but are rather entirely the fault of Israel. Something is deeply, deeply wrong in academia.
Yeah. And it has been for a while. Let's look at the next one.
Here's where it gets really funny.
So, okay, here's what's interesting. So Don Q says, and we can actually, I think we can click on this one. Settlers aren't civilians. When you steal the land of others and deny them basic human rights, you don't really get to be a civilian. So if you carry this out to its logical conclusion, what he's saying is that none of the Jews living in the Levant are innocent because essentially they're all colonizers, settlers, etc.
Somebody brings this up in a response.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting. Another person, presumably also left wing,
Hamilton, you got to go back.
presumably left wing, also says basically like, okay, wait a second. Does this mean that me as a non-Native American doesn't deserve human rights and could be gunned down at any moment? And here's the response they get. Go ahead and switch over to the other one, Hamilton. Sohail with a hammer and sickle in her thing says, yes. John De Leon, technically, yes. Kraz, yeah. I mean, the number of people that are now jumping on here and saying, yeah, you can be gunned down. If you're a non-Native American and living in the United States and you get gunned down, you essentially have it coming.
It keeps going. And while it's fun to laugh at insane people on Twitter, it's actually really disturbing how popular this self-destructive, nihilistic death cult apparently is on certain elements of the left. Another Twitter account, TBH, yeah. And
I'm not in the military. My point is they're being trained to hate Israel from the time that they can barely walk, from the time that they're toddlers. First time the name Palestinian. Oh, we got that one.
Also do as a non-Native American.
Next one, Boo Gray, yes. Hindi with a Palestinian flag in there. Correct. Next one.
You don't need to read the titles.
Osa KU PhD. Yes. Right. So once again, you gotta love higher education. Yes, you deserve to have a rocket hit your house, settler.
Another one. Yes.
Yes. So it's again, it's just interesting to watch that this idea that if you fall into this category, it's not simply that they disagree with you. It's not simply they think you're wrong. It's not simply that they think that there is, maybe some sort of political recourse that needs to be taken in the form of maybe reparations or whatever else it is. No, if you get hit with a rocket, if you get killed, you have it coming because you are an oppressor. And human rights don't apply to them because they've decided you're an oppressor.
So yeah, academia is a big part of the problem. And I think that that's a major part of the reason that the leftists, it's because they're being trained this in school. So, and let's just jump forward a little bit here because I don't want to spend another hour on this. Whoops.
Yeah.
And so here's an example from another professor, somebody with a PhD, who says, I'm seeing many of the same people who think that speech is violence and that people will be harmed.
This is not ignorance. It's a great question. Forgive my ignorance, but do Israelis and Palestinians get along in Jerusalem? I know you said your family lives in Jerusalem. Yeah, they get along fine. They're not really Palestinians. They don't call themselves Palestinians. They get along fine. Do you ask yourself why they called refugees? Like why? What were they taking refuge from? Why are they refugees? Why is it that they can't? Is it that they have nowhere that they can go? What's the story there? I plan on addressing that with my father. I've covered that on my show before, but it bears review during this period that we're in here. So, but I plan on going through the history so you can understand better the evolution of these different of this conflict when I am on here tomorrow, and you'll be free to ask him tons of questions. He loves getting questions. So he's a professor, so he loves teaching. But yeah, they get along fine for the most part. During the Intifada, there was issues with Arabs blowing themselves up on buses all over the place, just the purpose of killing as many civilians as possible. And that was the Intifada they had in 2006 and also 1990. After I left, it was I left in July of 1990, and like a couple months later is when the Intifada started.
Harmed by hearing milquetoast center-left opinions like mine because they're not in lockstep with the woke orthodoxy minimizing and condoning kidnapping, gang rape, and murder.
And it's important to understand that the person that's making this, again, PhD, and considers herself left of center. She's a center leftist. And again, she's absolutely right. She walks into a college campus and makes, again, the most any.
Joe, sorry, Rick Nichols asked me, Joe, sorry for the levity, but I can't help but notice that the IDF doesn't have a transgender spokesperson. What gives? My personal belief is the fact that they probably would consider having it is a major part of the problem in Israel. But yeah. Look, I mean, I will share this with you, okay? As a religious Jew, my perspective about Israel is not thoroughly supportive of everything that happens there. Quite the contrary. I have a lot of issues with the governance of Israel and the fact that they are so tolerant of leftist ideology, and that they're far less religious and represent and allow too much leftist ideology to seep into their culture. So, yeah. And ultimately, I think that this is, we're all at God's mercy. And they don't seem to be working really hard to ensure that they're on his good side. Too many. I don't want to speak for all of them. Too many of their policies and are too close to embracing transgenderism or promoting it.
Any sort of statement that would have been considered perfectly rational and reasonable 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're perpetrating violence against trans communities or whatever it is, right? But now all of a sudden when it's Hamas and Israel, kidnapping, gang rape, and murder is all fine. It's just part of decolonization. And this is...
Oh, and just to follow up, Jojo, I just want to point out one more thing to you. There are, I think, hundreds of thousands of Arabs living in Israel. It's not like Jews can't go live in Saudi Arabia or Syria or Lebanon or Libya or any of these countries without there are plenty of Arabs who lived there. The whole refugee thing happened because when Israel was being granted their statehood, the Arabs were told that there's going to be an attack, and if you leave your homes and head out, that you'll be able to get your home back after we destroy Israel. So leave your homes so that you're not like in the zone of danger. And when we destroy Israel, you'll get your homes back. That's how this whole thing started. They're like, oh, okay. So we'll just march back on in here after all the Jews are killed. That's essentially, that's their genesis.
This is the part where, again, a liberal, a left of center liberal is starting to recognize, wait a second, there's something seriously flawed in this sort of reasoning and seriously intellectually inconsistent. Let's look at the next one. So Farah, she says, this tweet demonstrates something I've become aware of in the last 5 years. And this is important because this is the red pilling that is continually going on. When you look at people like Jordan Peterson, who used to be a socialist, when you look at people like Elon Musk, who, had always voted for Democrats, when you look at people like Joe Rogan, all these guys used to consistently across the board vote Democrat, all these other steps. She goes, this tweet demonstrates something I've become aware of in the last 5 years.
Do we want to show them what the tweet was that she's quoting?
No, not just yet. I want
All
to. I want to read it. That all those marginalized people that I, as a silly, bleeding heart lefty, cared so much for are no different to those they claim were in the wrong. The colonists, the racists, the sexists, blah, blah, blah. As soon as people get the chance, they'll power grab and walk all over others, complete with the same violence, racism, etc. It's not about righting wrongs. Well, Najama, in answer, I really did think it was about making the world better, raising people up and finding peace together. But don't worry, my eyes are now open.
She was writing in response to that Somalia, Minnesota, that we quoted earlier. Her name was Najama.
And they're showing it. They're showing a picture. This is on the In Wokeness Twitter channel. This is what decolonization means, and it won't stop with Israel. And again, it's them taking a woman, and I mean, she's clearly been messed up pretty bad, and loading her onto a truck. But I scroll up again. I want to read this off again. This is the part that I think is so interesting here. That all those marginalized people that I, as a silly, bleeding heart lefty, cared so much for are no different to those they claim were in the wrong, the colonists, the racists, the sexists. As soon as people get the chance, they'll power grab and walk all over others, complete with the same violence and racism. It's not about righting wrongs. And then again, this part I'm reading again because I think it's so important. Well, Najama, in answer, I really did think it was about making the world better, raising people up and finding peace together. But don't worry, my eyes are open now.
Okay, so I don't want to steal any more of his content, only because I feel as if I'm walking all over him, and that's not right. A link is in the description below if you want to watch the entire video, as well as a link to his channel, which I highly recommend that you subscribe to. Again, if you're wondering who this base gentleman is, it's Nick Freitas or Freitas. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Freitas or Freitas. I'm gonna actually put a note to him in my thing. I'm going to put a note to him saying, Freitas. He will probably get a notification. If you see this, I'd love to have you on my show. It's in my description, which is a weird way to do this, but what the hell? Best way to reach me is Twitter. All right, there we go. My little shout out to Nick. Great job. Second Nick that I really like. AD says, why is Hamas in charge in Gaza but not the West Bank? I haven't heard any news of violence like that. It's coming from the West Bank. I think they have elections in Gaza. In the West, I'm not sure politically. That's a good question. I'm going to try to actually make note of this question. I think this is such a good question. I'll ask my dad. It's a really good question, and but I don't believe that Hamas is in charge in the West Bank. I'm not sure the politics in the West Bank. Please ask Great Logic, yeah, that's what they call my dad, Great Logic, to recommend some books for we lay people can read to learn about this history. Okay, we'll do. I'm a right winger. I think Israel cutting off water and bombing 2.3 million civilians to get 40,000 militants is gross. Hamas is underground. Okay, I understand that. I think it's gross also. I think it's gross also. What do you suggest? Tell me what you think they should do. When the rats purposefully hide amongst their own people. Tell me what you think they should do. What do you think? When they're using them as shields, what do you tell me? I'm not. I don't think what your position here is not lacking in. I don't think it's a stupid position. I don't. I'm simply asking, what do you think that they should do? That's my question. Come up with a better answer. You can't. We're sitting 6,000 miles away, and we're not the targets of their venom. So you sort of have to actually picture that you're living 5 miles from Gaza, and ask yourself what you think should be done. You were spared. Let's assume that you're not acting emotionally. You're able to act logically. But you know that, like, okay, next month it could be you, next week, next year, or your kid. Tell me what you think should be done. Because they don't have the comfort of an ocean as protection. So you tell me what you think they should do. What steps would you take to protect your family? These not easy questions. Oh, is that it? They run by Fata? Fats party. All right. I want to share one last thing with you. Someone shared this with me earlier, this link. I haven't checked it out. But from Thomas Sowell saying, why trading land for peace is destroying Israel. So we'll check this out. So I like Thomas Sowell. I have not seen this yet. This was just shared with me during the stream.
No phrase represents more of a triumph of hope over experience than the phrase Middle East peace process. A close second might be the once fashionable notion that Israel should trade land for peace. Since everybody seems to be criticizing Israel for its military response to the rockets being fired into their country from the Gaza Strip, let me add my criticisms as well. The Israelis traded land for peace, but they have never gotten the peace, so they should take back the land. Maybe a couple of generations of Palestinians in Gaza living in peace under Israeli occupation and a couple of generations of the occupation troops squelching the terrorists, militants for those of you who are squeamish, would set up conditions where the Palestinians would be free to vote on whether they would like to remain occupied or to have their own state, minus terrorists and their rockets. Casualty totals alone should be enough to show that the Palestinian people are the biggest losers from the current situation, where the terrorists among them, firing rockets into Israel, can bring devastating retaliatory strikes.
And I'll tell you this. As I'm listening to him, I'm thinking about this situation. And I'm not saying this is where I'm going to land. My first thought is this. I definitely don't want to see innocents killed. I don't. I also don't see how Israel can feel secure, given the current context, given the fact that especially as some are commenting that the way that they were able to undermine Israeli security was by being clever and not using technology and basically flying below radar in that sense. That being the case, tell me why Israel should not occupy Gaza. Take out all the terrorists, occupy Gaza, and do exactly what Thomas Sowell is recommending here. Occupy it for a generation, and then let you vote to have your state free of us, free of a terrorist regime, and live peacefully, or remain in occupation. Choose. Because this is untenable. The idea of living next door to people who are firing rockets off at you or kidnapping your women and children and beheading them. This is not a tenable situation. Israel will take a PR hit, but Israel's always taking PR hits. They occupy Gaza. And people will be screaming, and the Ilan Omars of the world will start, and the Anti-Annies of the world will be making all sorts of idiotic claims about how they're the oppressors who are committing genocides just like Auschwitz. You lost all credibility when you made that comparison. Zero. You have zero credibility that you have any conceptualization of critical analysis when you made that comparison. Because you basically showed that you have that you're willing to take two things that are not remotely similar and put them in the same breath as if they are one. So clearly, you're absent any legitimate critical analysis. So no, I can't take your perspectives seriously. I think you're a joke. But with respect to, actually having a serious conversation about this with people who are, making fair comments, like Utiz is here. This is a fair comment. Tell me what better solution there is other than short of occupation. A militarized occupation. What Nick Naylor says, my natural stance is usually very anti-Israel, but I've been closely watching the videos and news. Israel got the green light to glass in my book. Americans have an idea of war based on movies. They don't know anything about war and its costs. We're 3 days late to freeze over innocent lives. UT's true. Thing is, modern wars usually cause more civilian casualties than military. Always. Until we return to war as a game, it won't change. Yeah.
Why don't the Palestinians vote for some representatives who would make a lasting peace with Israel? Because any such candidates would be killed by the terrorists long before Election Day, so nobody volunteers for that dangerous role.
It's true.
We don't know what the Palestinians really want, and won't know as long as they are ruled by Hamas, Hezbollah, and the like.
We do know what they want. They just did what they wanted. We know exactly what they want.
Whatever the benefits of peace for the Palestinian population, what are the terrorists going to do in peacetime? Become librarians and furniture salesmen?
Probably.
So-called world opinion has been a largely negative factor in this situation. Nothing is easier than for people living in peace and safety in Paris or Rome to call for a ceasefire after the Israelis retaliate against people who are firing rockets into their country. The time to cease fire was before the rockets were fired. What do calls for ceasefire and negotiations do? They lower the price of launching attacks. This is true not only in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world as well. During the Vietnam War, when American clergymen were crying out, "Stop the bombing," they paid little attention to the fact that bombing pauses made it easier for North Vietnam to move more ammunition into South Vietnam to kill both South Vietnamese and Americans. After Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, if British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had heeded calls for a ceasefire, that would have simply lowered the price to be paid by the Argentine government for their invasion. Go back 100 years, before there was the United Nations, and before world opinion was taken into account.
And that's another thought, by the way. The term he used there, the price of invasion. The price of invasion reflects the value that you're putting on that, on the lives that are being taken. You know, I have a lot of issues with how America reacted after 9/11. But part of it was looking for a price of the invasion, like exacting that price of the invasion. And unfortunately, as Nick Freitas pointed out, you cannot exact retribution specifically on the militants themselves. So they shield themselves with friends, family, women, children, specifically hoping that you'll hit them and they can film it and upload it. So what solution do you have?
An Argentine invasion of the Falkland Islands at that time would have risked not only a British counterattack to retake the islands, but also British attacks on Argentina itself. Anywhere in the world, attacks such as those on Israel today would not only have risked retaliation, but invasion and annihilation of the government that launched those attacks. Today, so-called world opinion not only limits the price to be paid for aggression or terrorism, it has even led to the self-indulgence of third parties talking pretty talk about limiting the response of those who are attacked to what is proportionate.
And they also talk about that they're more, this is the thing, is they cloak themselves in morality, that they're far more moral than the people who are responding. You're way more moral, way more moral. Because you never actually had to sit and actually face what they're facing. You sit like a fat cow in your couch and sitting there passing judgment that, like, oh, you're so much more moral, such a better person.
By this
eating your potato chips on your couch, you're much more moral. If you were in that position, you would handle it way better.
Reasoning, we should not have declared war on Japan for bombing Pearl Harbor. We should have gone over to Japan, bombed one of their harbors, and let it go at that.
Yeah.
Does anyone imagine that this would have led to Japan's becoming as peaceful today as it has become after Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Or is the real agenda to engage in moral preening from a safe distance and at somebody else's expense?
Well said.
Those who think negotiations are a magic answer seem not to understand that when A wants to annihilate B, this is not an issue that can be resolved amicably around a conference table.
Well said. Thomas Sowell. My God, I love that man.
But the good news is that people.
Oh, by the way, RK apparently has announced he's running in the Independent Party. That's an interesting conversation as far as the impact that will have on our 2024 elections. I do plan on getting back to this. Probably next week. All right. That leaves me with this final comment here from Nicholas Starro saying Palestine has received over $50 billion in relief in the past decade. Oh, I'll give you one of these too. Imagine the systems they could have built for that money. Yep, Hamas kept keeping Palestine in poverty is a choice because this is not about human rights. They don't care about Palestinian people. Hamas doesn't care about them at all. Poor people are easier to indoctrinate. That's true. It's very true. It's very true. All right. All right. Tomorrow, God willing, I will have great logic in here. I haven't confirmed with him yet, but I'm hopeful that it's happening. Should happen. Good chance. Almost definitely. We'll say 90%. That's going to be, God willing, at 10 p.m. tomorrow. I appreciate you all joining me here. It's time for me to kick you all on over to my good friend Nick Ricada, because he damn well better be streaming. Nah, he ain't. Where are you, Nick? Nick. You're not here? Is that what you're all trying to tell me? Is that what you're all saying? Oh my God. What's to do with that? What to do about that? Yeah, I see. No Nick tonight. Thank you. The fight is biblical, whether you believe in the Bible or not. Those that do are trying all they can to bring about prophecy. Who's on the devil's side? I'll tell you this: nothing in Torah advocates for this type of warring, but certainly to many, it's a religious issue. I think to Christians and Muslims, it's a religious issue. I'm torn. I think I'm gonna be shutting this thing down. I think it's time. I had a good rant tonight. What else? What more could you want? That was the price of admission right there. Unless any of you have a suggestion that let me. He's driving. All right. So you know what? I'm gonna send you somewhere. I'm gonna send you somewhere else. I can't just let you guys. Let me see if you're going on now. You know what? All right. I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna surprise you. I'm gonna make a peace offering to my friends Sitch and Adam, and I'm gonna ask you that when you get there, let them know Good Logic sent to you. Okay, as I bounce you on over there. So, and yeah, tell them that, and tell Sitch and Adam that I miss them. Okay, that Joe says he misses you. Salut, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, I say to you, my friends, Godspeed.